Max Salomon, the founder partner of Black Dot Films VR, is going to speak about maintaining production standards, the challenges of capturing wildlife and beyond wildlife. I think he's going to tell us how to find fantastic angles, but especially he's going to tell us about non-fiction storytelling. I'm very happy to see Max Salomon on stage. You go, Max. Thank you.
So I think comparing what we just heard to where I'm going to go, is I think there's a dystopian kind of nature to VR, but what we've been working on is trying to figure out how to hack it. What is it that this big data can tell us about how we could do our jobs better? As storytellers, as media makers, as people in VR. And in terms of trying to figure out, I think right now especially, is what is VR good at? And I think that if we're going to look at this question of where we are in the winter of VR right now, and what it takes to get to the spring, it's figuring out what is VR good at, because it's not good at everything, right? VR has a lot of drawbacks in terms of a platform. One of the big ones, of course, is that, especially in VR cinema and 360, is that you give up control over what the audience sees. So if we're doing a film, you let the audience, normally what we would do is we would edit that film, so we would tell the audience exactly where to look, right? We would tell the audience to look at the amazing view that you have up here, then you'd cut to this woman climbing up, in a close-up, or you'd see her hand, or you'd see her feet, and we'd tell you what exactly that experience was going to be. What we're doing is we're letting the audience look everywhere. Now, if you're trying to tell a story with a beginning and a middle and an end, and that has complexity, as you give up that control, as you give up the power of editing, which is really, if you think about it traditionally in the history of film, the grammar of cinema, right? It's how we construct a complex narrative. How is it that you can tell a story with a beginning and middle end in VR in a format that has so much freedom for the audience? So we have done a lot of the content for National Geographic. We've taken people to the surface of Mars. We launched for Facebook, we launched the Evil Empire. We launched their VR Live platform, their 360 Live platform, with an hour-long broadcast from not the middle of Mars, or from the surface of Mars, but from this research station in the middle of nowhere in Utah, with Neil deGrasse Tyson and a number of scientists and astronauts. All as these people that were in an immersion context of an actual virtual reality of living on Mars were coming out of being of this simulated context and coming out, and we did that with them. But to get back to trying to control the story, one of the important things is navigating where an audience looks. And we started very early on with the products that we did for National Geographic, realizing that we actually can control exactly where somebody's looking. And it comes actually from some of the big data and analytics that we have back from Facebook. So I'm going to show you a piece that we did about hammerhead sharks. It's a very simple piece. I'm not going to show you the entire piece. It's a piece that essentially consists of a diver on a back of a ship. He jumps in, you jump in with him, and the water is empty. There are no sharks. So you look around, but where are you looking? You're looking everywhere. We're social creatures. We tend to look for cues as to where to look from the people around us. So we look to the diver as to where to look. And he looks in a certain direction. And the piece I'm going to show you is a point of view. Talking about VR is like golfing about opera. It doesn't really make sense. So you kind of have to experience it. But I'm going to show you a point of view animation of where people are looking based on some of the data that we got back. And it's cut down, so it's a reduced piece. So this hopefully should work. I might need to click. Uh-oh. Doesn't seem to want to play the media here. All right, well, that means that I can't actually show you the clip. But in any event, so you fall through you fall into the water, and the diver is looking around, as well as you. So you follow the diver's gaze because we're social creatures, and he looks over in a direction. We found that we can actually then hold your eye there because we have words that start to blur in that say, turn around. Now, normally that would obviously get you to turn around, but it actually holds you for a moment because you need to figure out what the words say. And by the time that you turn around, there's a giant hammerhead shark in your face. So what we've created, actually, is editing again. We've gotten the audience to do the editing for us. We've gotten the audience to be surprised by something that they didn't see coming. Because we drew their attention away, we drew their eye to look where we wanted them to look, and then surprise them. It's the horror movie jump cut. Now, 5% of the people actually do see the shark coming. They somehow don't function by the rest of the social cues that we have and are looking this way and see a shark swim up. It's not particularly dramatic. But if you have that moment where you're fixed over here and you're looking and say, why am I looking over here? And then suddenly you get a face full of sharks. So that's one way of starting to manipulate the audience. The other thing that we've started to discover is when we started to get, with the number of eyeballs that we have at National Geographic with our content, is that the pieces tend to go viral very quickly. And Facebook has started to share its big data with us. So we have the heat maps and the eye tracking information back. And that's unlocked a number of other ways of telling stories for us. In terms of figuring out how we get the audience to do the editing. So I'm going to see if the second clip will play.
I'm Alan Olsen. I'm from North Jutland, Denmark.
And because he's a person, you also tend to look at him.
I'm a Viking. We aren't role-playing. You're not going to go out there if you're afraid of getting hurt. Trained for years to fight these battles. I'm a spearman. My brothers are defending me. We have our roles. We train formations.
But what it allows us to do is to cut more the way that we would do in cinema, because while you have the illusion of freedom, you don't actually have as much freedom as you think you do. Yes, you have the freedom to completely turn around, and there's a full battlefield behind you, and there's action there. But again, the big data is showing us exactly where people are looking, and they're all looking in the same place. It allows us to do things like collision cutting. It allows us to actually accelerate the pace of the story that we're telling. A lot of VR that you'll see, there's time sometimes, especially in 360, is allowed for the viewer to get reoriented because the person making that content doesn't know where the person is looking. So once you start to crack that, it opens up a whole nother set of experiences. I'm going to show you another piece that we did. This was a piece that was, in the end, seen by over 20 million people. And it's a story about a tree, a giant sequoia tree, and these two scientists that climbed the giant sequoia tree. We never expected to have 20 million people want to watch a film about a plant. But what also happened is that there's embedded inside that story is actually the story about climate change. Because these trees are 3,000 years old, they experience time and climate change on a completely different scale than we do, right? For them, climate change, which happens in 100 years, in a century, which we can't really perceive, is overnight for a 3,000-year-old creature. And what does that mean for a creature that takes that long to mature, takes that long to have a life cycle? One of the interesting things that we know about our audience at National Geographic on Facebook is that they're actually politically very diverse. You have actual climate skeptics in there. So if you can engage them with a story about an iconic American tree that they love, or they have a relationship to in any case, and get them to question what they think they know, or what they think they've been told by Breitbart and all these other characters that we just heard about, by implanting that message back in there to actually have doubt, it became a really powerful engine for discussion. And of course, we kind of read the comment stream religiously, and you can see these debates in 40,000 comments play out between people that are skeptics and people that aren't. And you again get back the village square where people are forced to engage, right? Part of the scary thing about the communities that Facebook sort of creates through mirroring is that if you're a person on the left or a person on the right, you can live in a world that only reflects back to you what it is that you see, right? Or what you believe yourself. This content created a discussion that broke those barriers. So I'm going to show you a short version of this piece. But again, keep an eye on the way that we're actually using movement and cues to manipulate the audience. Oh. Come on. Tell why it doesn't want to play.
Do you have a video or is it a link?
Yeah, no, this is embedded in the app. All right, well, I do have this also in headset, and I also have it available if anybody wants to see it later. So as we sort of moved forward with this, we started to wonder what other stories can we tell that are complex, right? We've been doing this for National Geographic for 2 years. We have done close to 30 films with them. In the beginning, yes, we were doing the very simple things that you could see in early VR. Where it was aerials over Iceland and those kinds of things, with a little bit of information embedded. But by sort of cracking the grammar of how it is that you can actually now tell a more complex story, because we have the ability to get back control over the audience to some extent, or at least over their experience of the story, we are able to get into subject matter that normally I think a lot of people I've heard anyway say, oh, well, I can't tell that story in VR because of the nature of the medium. I can't get into something that is deeply psychological. I can't get into something that is that has too much complexity to it because of all these sort of drawbacks of the medium of not being able to control the audience or the audience's interaction. One of the things that we sort of saw as the next space is that VR is actually incredibly intimate. As opposed to television or cinema, it is something where you connect incredibly closely with your subject. Eye contact in virtual reality is unlike anything else. We did a piece that was also tied to a magazine cover story about orphaned baby orangutans. And there in Borneo, these orphans exist because of palm oil. The forests are cut down, their parents are killed. They're literally, and then taken from their parents' arms. The parents are oftentimes killed in front of them, and then they end up in the illegal pet trade. So it's a very sad story, but again, trying to get the eyeballs in there, you can't start with a story that's sad. You can take people there once they fall in love. but it's really easy to fall in love with these guys. So as we were filming this film, as you can see, every night they have to go back to the cage because they're so innocent they don't even know what a tree is, right? Some of them have a fear of heights. They don't even want to climb, right? So they really have to be taught what it means to be an orangutan. And so while we were filming with them, and then at night they get taken back to these cages where they spend the night, and then during the day they get taken out to tree school to learn to climb and be comfortable in small trees, and then eventually they graduate to bigger trees and eventually get released into the forest. So they get transported in this wheelbarrow. So imagine a wheelbarrow full of 15 baby little orangutans, and now you attach a VR camera to that, right? And of course they see a blinking thing that is shiny and reflective and interesting, and they want to touch it and break it. And we lost a number of cameras that way, but it was something that I kept insisting, actually, no, let's put another camera out there. We're in the middle of Borneo. It's our last camera, but this is what it is. This is what the piece is about. And the reason for it is that as they're riding along in this wheelbarrow, they're so curious, they want to reach out and touch the camera. But in VR, the experience inside the head mask is that they're seeing you and wanting to reach out and touch you. And it gets at a core of what VR is really good at, is that it's an audience of one. It's not a mass medium. It is not a film or a presentation that we do in front of a theater with a broad audience. It is specifically targeted, or at least feels that way, that relationship is unique between the subject and this one audience person, and that's you. So when I eventually showed this film to my mother-in-law over Christmas, and I often don't get to see people interacting with the stuff that I make, and she watched this film, and at one point also, they're loading the orphans back into the cages, and one of them realizes that she's not being watched, and so she leans over and she puts her lips on the lens. Right? In VR, to the viewer, she just wanted to see what it was, right, and touch it. But in VR, this orangutan leans over and gives you a kiss. She took off the headset at the end and was in tears and said, who do I write a check to? And she wrote a €500 check to, which was incredibly generous of her, given that she's on a fixed income and can't afford that, but because she had this one-on-one relationship with an orangutan. So that's another thing that we're really good at in VR, as opposed to film, is intimacy, the voice and the gaze and the eye contact of connecting with an individual. This kind of leads us to the next project that we just finished for National Geographic. They came to us and said, we have this big series that we're spending $60 million on, and we're building a massive set, and we're going to tell the story of a platoon in Iraq, and the beginnings of the insurgency story. So if you remember in 2004, just after Bush stood on an aircraft carrier in front of a banner that said, "Mission accomplished, we've won the war in Iraq," no one yet knew what the word insurgency meant. That's the time frame. And it's based on a book by a journalist, her name is Martha Raddatz, about this platoon that is on a patrol. They're ostensibly there to remove raw sewage and sort of do nation-building activities. They are in unarmed Humvees, and they get overrun by 20,000 Mahdi militia in an ambush. And it's the first ambush that launches what we now know as the insurgency and the war that's lasted ever since. They came to us and said, we're making this dramatic television series with Hollywood actors and all that. We want to do a VR experience. And there was some debate as to whether or not we should engage in sort of the fictionalization of these events that they were doing or not. And I was a strong advocate of saying, actually, the real guys, who are the real people that this story is based on? And we did find them. And the story that we ended up telling is deeply psychological. It goes inside the broken memories of soldiers who actually are so traumatized by what they went through that they can't fundamentally remember what happened. They have holes in their memory. They have memories where they can see something to one side of the image, and as they turn to the right side, the image literally goes away and goes blank. Or they come to a certain point, and then it cuts off like the film ran out. So this was an incredibly rich story for us. And the characters decide to tell the story themselves in their own words and look you in the eye as they talk about it. And then you step inside their broken memories and experience them yourself. We, of course, had the depth of a Hollywood set and all its trappings to play with to bring the world of their dreams and nightmares back to life. And we're incredibly lucky in that they really collaborated with us in the process. This last man here tells the story of being within minutes of the ambush, he's suddenly confronted by a child soldier, a 9-year-old boy holding a gun. And the kid points the gun at him. He's a father himself of kids, and he has to make the decision, and he does what he has to do. Within a couple minutes, the boy's father comes out and drags the body away, and comes back and picks up the gun and points it at him again. And he kills the father. Within another couple minutes, the grandfather comes out. The whole thing happens again. Within 2 weeks, within 2 months, he himself gets a Section 8 mental health discharge from the military. So this is the kind of story that we can actually tell in VR incredibly well and with an incredible amount of compassion, and in a way that we wouldn't be able to do in film or in cinema, because we'd have to show too much. We'd have to illustrate it in a way that we couldn't probably want to watch. Versus in VR, we let you connect with both him as well as the 3 people that he's telling the story about. So if there's anybody who has any questions, I'm happy to answer a few. I don't know as much.